At 6:42 on September 19, 1944, Sergeant Henry Hartman crouched inside the open turret of his M18 Hellcat tank destroyer, 3 miles east of Ericourt, France, watching dense fog slide low across the fields like a living thing. Somewhere inside that fog, the German 5th Panzer Army was moving toward him with orders to wipe out his battalion. Hartman was 24 years old. He had been in combat 47 days. He had already helped destroy 6 German armored vehicles. Intelligence reports were clear and grim. The 113th Panzer Brigade was advancing toward their position with 45 newly issued Panther tanks, factory-fresh machines with 5 inches of sloped frontal armor, enough to stop any American tank round at any range. Hartman's Hellcat had 1 inch of armor at best. The thickest plate on the vehicle measured 25 millimeters. The floor beneath his boots was thinner than 5 millimeters, sheet metal meant to keep out mud, not shells. A German machine gun could punch through the sides. The turret was open-topped, leaving the crew exposed to grenades, mortar fragments, and rifle fire from above. Tank crews across Third Army had already given the M18 its nickname. The paper coffin, the death trap, the fastest way to die in France. But it was fast. On open road, the Hellcat could hit 55 miles per hour, twice the speed of a Sherman, nearly 3 times faster than a Tiger. Speed was the entire idea. The Army's tank destroyer doctrine demanded mobility over protection. Hit, run, flank, kill, never stand and fight. The 704th Tank Destroyer Battalion had landed at Utah Beach 68 days earlier as the first unit in Europe equipped with M18s. They were supposed to be the answer to German armor, aggressive, mobile hunters designed to ambush and disappear. In just over 2 months, the battalion had destroyed 93 German vehicles. They had also lost 18 Hellcats destroyed, 22 damaged, 41 men killed, 73 wounded. The math was unforgiving. A Panther's 75mm gun could penetrate an M18 from 2,000 meters. The Hellcat's 76mm gun could not penetrate a Panther's frontal armor at any range, not even point blank. The only way to kill a Panther was from the side or rear, which meant closing distance, maneuvering under fire, and accepting the risk that came with it, which meant dying, sometimes quickly, sometimes screaming. Hartman commanded a 5-man crew: driver, assistant driver, gunner, loader, commander. All 5 understood the odds. Third Army estimated that 40% of all tank destroyer crews became casualties within 90 days of landing in France. The 704th had already passed that mark. Company C alone had lost 6 Hellcats in 3 weeks. 19 men killed, 8 wounded. As Hartman watched the fog thicken ahead of him, he knew the Panthers were coming. And when they did, speed would be the only thing standing between his crew and annihilation. Company C had started the campaign with 12 tank destroyers. By the morning of September 19th, only 10 were still operational. Battalion headquarters kept promising replacements. The replacements never came. Every morning brought new names on the casualty list. Every afternoon brought orders to advance. The Germans understood American tank destroyer doctrine as well as the Americans did. Panther crews were trained to target M18s first, kill the fast vehicles, remove the flanking threat, then deal with the slower Shermans at leisure. German tankers had their own nickname for the Hellcat: the tin can, the black coffin. The fog thickened. Visibility collapsed to 30 feet. At 6:55, Hartman's radio crackled. Lieutenant Edwin Leeper's voice cut through the static. German armor spotted. Panthers moving toward Rechicourt-la-Petite. Company C ordered forward. Hartman's platoon would take point. For M18 Hellcats, 45 Panther tanks. Dense fog. Paper-thin armor. At 6:58, Hartman's Hellcat rolled forward. The engine roared. 9 cylinders. Continental R975 radial. The same power plant used in the Sherman, but pushing half the weight. The M18 surged ahead with startling acceleration. It was the fastest tracked combat vehicle of the war, and speed was the only thing standing between its crew and death. Leeper's platoon advanced in column. For M18s spaced 20 meters apart. The fog was so dense Hartman could barely make out the silhouette of the vehicle ahead of him. Trees, hedgerows, and farm buildings appeared suddenly and vanished just as fast. Sound carried strangely. Engines echoed without direction. Every shadow could be armor. The road led northeast toward Rechicourt-la-Petite. Intelligence was clear. The 5th Panzer Army was launching a major counterattack, attempting to drive 3rd Army back across the Moselle River. The 704th Tank Destroyer Battalion was attached to the 4th Armored Division, Patton's spearhead into Germany. They had crossed the Moselle 2 weeks earlier. They had liberated Lunéville. They were threatening Nancy. Now the Germans were striking back. 2 newly formed panzer brigades, the 111th and 113th, had been rushed to the front. 90 Panthers, straight from the factory. Crews with limited training, but machines that required none. The Panther was 45 tons of German engineering. Sloped frontal armor. A long-barreled 75mm gun. Maximum road speed 29 miles per hour. Combat range over 1,200 meters. It could destroy a Sherman at 3 kilometers and shrug off return fire. Most American tank crews feared the Panther more than the Tiger. The M18 was something else entirely. 19 tons. Open turret. 76mm gun. 55 miles per hour. Its designers had sacrificed everything. Armor, protection, survivability, for speed. The Hellcat wasn't meant to be hit. If it was, the crew usually didn't survive. Tank destroyer doctrine relied on ambush, concealed positions, clear fields of fire, long sight lines, time to strike and relocate before return fire arrived. The fog erased all of that. Hartmann understood what it meant. They wouldn't see the Panthers at 1,000 meters. They wouldn't see them at 500. They would see them at 30 feet. And by then, it would already be too late to run. At this range, even a Panther's machine guns could penetrate the M18's armor. Inside the Hellcat, there was nowhere to hide. The open turret offered no protection from bullets, shrapnel, or blast. A single hit could turn the crew compartment into a furnace of steel fragments and fire. At 7:12, the platoon reached a crossroads. Lieutenant Leeper's Hellcat took the lead position. Hartmann's vehicle moved in behind him. 2 more M18s followed, engines idling low. They advanced at 15 miles per hour, creeping through the fog. It wasn't lifting. Hartmann checked his ammunition load again, 45 rounds total. A mix of high explosive and armor-piercing. The armor-piercing rounds were M62 solid shot. No explosive filler, just hardened steel. At 1,000 meters, an M62 could penetrate 88 millimeters of armor. A Panther's frontal plate was thicker than that and sloped. Any frontal hit would bounce. Side armor, maybe. Rear armor, yes. The equation was brutal and simple. To kill a Panther, the Hellcat had to maneuver. To maneuver, it had to expose itself. To be exposed meant dying fast. Every tank destroyer crew in Europe understood the trade-off. Speed versus armor. Mobility versus survival. The M18 bet everything on speed, and speed only mattered if there was room to use it. The fog erased that advantage. The radio crackled. Contact front. German armor. Range unknown. Visibility 30 feet. Leeper's voice followed, calm and controlled. Steady. All vehicles hold. Prepare to engage. Hartmann stared into the fog. Somewhere ahead, Panther tanks were advancing. 45 tons of steel feeling their way forward, guns loaded, engines rumbling softly. The fastest tank destroyer in the war was about to fight the heaviest armored tank in Europe at point-blank range. At 7:19, the fog thinned just enough. A gun barrel emerged 30 feet ahead. Then the outline of a turret. A Panther. It was moving slowly, cautious, searching. The German crew had no idea 4 American tank destroyers were waiting for them in the mist. Leeper reacted instantly. No radio traffic. Hand signals only. The platoon fanned out. 20 meters of spacing became 40. Each Hellcat eased into its own firing position, engines barely above idle. Hartmann's driver edged left, 10 meters, then stopped. The gunner traversed the turret smoothly. The loader slammed an armor-piercing round into the breech. The Panther advanced another 25 feet. Its commander stood upright in the cupola, scanning the fog, eyes searching for threats that weren't supposed to be there. Leeper fired first. The 76mm gun cracked, the sound sharp and violent in the fog. The shell struck the Panther's side armor at a perfect 90-degree angle. Penetration. The German tank lurched. Smoke poured from the engine deck. Flames followed seconds later. The crew bailed out. Three men running blindly into the fog, abandoning their vehicle. 5 seconds later, another Panther appeared. Same direction, same slow advance. The German tankers didn't yet know their lead vehicle was burning. Hartmann's gunner fired. The round struck low, smashing into the running gear. Metal shattered. The Panther lurched to a stop, track destroyed. Its turret began to rotate. Searching. Hartmann's loader was already ready. Another round slid home. The gun fired again. This time the shell hit the turret ring. Steel deformed. The turret seized. The Panther was now blind, immobile, and trapped in the fog, alive, but already dead. The German crew abandoned the vehicle. 2 Panthers destroyed. 2 minutes. 0 American casualties. Then the fog shifted. A light wind pushed in from the east. Visibility stretched to 50 feet, just enough for Hartmann to finally see what was coming. And what he saw tightened his chest. Panthers. Dozens of them. They were spread across the field ahead, dark shapes moving steadily through the mist. The entire 113th Panzer Brigade was advancing toward Richelieu, a full armored force driving straight forward in column formation. No flank security, no reconnaissance elements, no infantry screens, just steel, engines, and momentum. The German tank commanders could see no more than 30 feet. They were advancing blind, trusting the fog to protect them. They had no idea American tank destroyers were already waiting inside their formation. The 113th Panzer Brigade was driving directly into an ambush. Leeper didn't hesitate. He gave the signal. All 4 M18 Hellcats opened fire. The engagement erupted instantly. The Hellcats fired from different positions, their muzzle blasts flashing briefly through the fog before disappearing again. The Germans had no fixed point to return fire toward. Panther after Panther took hits: side armor, rear armor, engine decks, ammunition storage. Steel ruptured. Fuel ignited. Turrets blew open. German tanks began exploding across the field. The Panthers tried to respond. Turrets swung toward suspected American positions, but the fog made accurate targeting impossible. High explosive shells detonated uselessly in empty fields. Armor-piercing rounds vanished into the mist. Not a single German round struck an M18. Hartmann's crew worked without pause. The loader slammed shells home every 8 seconds. Armor-piercing. High explosive. Armor-piercing again. The gunner tracked silhouettes through the haze, firing at ranges of 30 to 60 feet. So close that ballistic drop didn't matter. Every hit penetrated. At this distance, the M18's thin armor was irrelevant because the Germans couldn't see well enough to shoot back. By 7:24, the results were staggering. Leeper's platoon had knocked out 15 Panthers. 5 minutes of combat. 15 German tanks destroyed. 3 M18s were lost, but not to enemy fire. One threw a track while maneuvering in the fog. Another stalled and was abandoned. The third was hit by friendly artillery falling short of its target. Hartmann's Hellcat was still operational. Then the radio crackled again. Company C moving up. Captain Tom Evans inbound. 2 more platoons. 8 additional M18s. The Germans weren't facing a platoon anymore. They were about to face the entire company. That was when Hartmann saw movement ahead. 6 more Panthers emerged from the fog, heading straight toward his position. 6 against 1. 30 feet of visibility. 23 rounds left. Hartmann made his decision instantly. Attack. Speed normally kept the Hellcat alive, but speed meant nothing in fog this thick. Armor meant nothing at point-blank range. The only advantage left was surprise. The Germans didn't know where he was. He knew exactly where they were. The driver accelerated. The Hellcat surged forward at 30 miles per hour, engine howling as it tore through the fog. The 6 Panthers were moving in single file, 50 feet between vehicles, standard German column spacing. The lead Panther was 70 feet ahead. Hartmann's gunner locked on. 7:26. First shot. Range, 60 feet. Angle, side armor. The round punched through just behind the turret. The Panther shuddered, then stopped. Smoke poured from the hull. The crew bailed out and vanished into the fog. Hartmann didn't slow down. The other 5 Panthers kept moving. They hadn't heard the first shot over the roar of their own engines. Hartmann's Hellcat shifted position, 20 feet to the right. The driver kept the engine at idle, ready to surge forward at a moment's notice. The second Panther emerged from the fog. Hartmann's gunner fired. 8 seconds after the previous shot. The armor-piercing round struck the running gear. The track shattered. The Panther lurched sideways and stopped hard. Its turret began to rotate, slowly, searching. Too slow. Another round was already chambered. The gunner fired again. Turret ring. The Panther's gun froze mid-traverse. 2 down. For Panthers continued forward, still blind, still unaware. The Hellcat moved again, 40 feet forward, then 10 feet left. The driver tucked the vehicle behind a low stone wall. It offered almost no protection, but it broke the Hellcat's outline just enough to vanish back into the fog. The third Panther rolled past 20 feet away, close enough to hear the engine. The German crew never looked left. Hartmann waited, let it pass, then fired into the rear armor. 18 millimeters, the weakest plate on the tank. The round punched through and ignited the ammunition. The Panther exploded. 3 down. 3 Panthers remained. The fourth Panther stopped. Its commander finally understood something was wrong. German voices burst over the radio, confused, urgent. 3 tanks lost in less than 90 seconds. No visible enemy. No return fire. Just explosions appearing from nowhere. The turret rotated, scanning. Hartmann moved. Full throttle. The Hellcat swept right, 50 feet, keeping the Panther centered in the gunner's sight. The German tank turned just enough to expose its side armor. The gunner fired. Direct hit. The Panther began to burn. 4 down. 2 Panthers left. The remaining German crews panicked. Both reversed immediately. German doctrine was clear: when ambushed, withdraw, regroup, call for support. But reversing blind in fog was lethal. Hartmann pursued. 30 miles per hour. The fifth Panther backed into a drainage ditch. The tank tilted sharply. The crew tried to free it. Forward, reverse, forward again. The engine screamed. Hartmann's gunner fired. Side shot. The round punched through the fuel tank. The Panther erupted in flames. 5 down. 1 Panther remaining. The last tank was retreating faster now, 40 feet, 50 feet, fading into the fog. Hartmann chased. The M18 could reach 55 miles per hour on open road. In fog and broken ground, they managed 35. It was enough. The Panther came back into view at 60 feet, still reversing. The commander stood in the cupola, torso exposed, trying to navigate blind. Hartmann's gunner fired. The round struck the rear armor and penetrated the engine compartment. The Panther stopped. Dead. The crew bailed out, 6 figures running into the fog. 6 Panthers destroyed. Hartmann's Hellcat had fired 23 rounds and still had 17 remaining. For minutes of combat, 0 damage to the M18. And somewhere beyond the fog, 30 more German tanks were still advancing toward Company C. At 7:32, Captain Tom Evans arrived with the rest of Company C, 8 more Hellcats. 12 M18s total. The battle was only beginning. The fog began to thin. Visibility stretched to 100 feet, and the battlefield emerged piece by piece. Burning Panthers, 21 of them, lay scattered across 300 meters of open ground. Black smoke climbed into the pale morning sky. German crews moved through the fields below, some wounded, some surrendering, most running east toward their own lines. The 113th Panzer Brigade had driven straight into an ambush. In 12 minutes, it had lost half a company. But the Germans were not withdrawing. They were adapting. The brigade had started the morning with 45 Panthers. 21 were destroyed. 24 remained, and those 24 were spreading out, probing for flanks, preparing to crush Company C with weight and firepower. Captain Tom Evans reacted immediately. He deployed his tank destroyers into a wide defensive arc, 12 M18s spread across 400 meters. Each Hellcat was assigned a sector. Fields of fire overlapped. Kill zones were drawn not on maps, but in the heads of the crews. The fog continued to burn off. By 8 o'clock, visibility would reach 500 meters. At that distance, the equation changed. A Panther could penetrate an M18 anywhere, front, side, rear. The Hellcat's 1-inch armor was meaningless. But at 500 meters, the M18's 76mm gun could still penetrate a Panther's side armor. Never the front. Never the front. Company C had 12 guns. The Germans attacked at 7:48. 24 Panthers, advancing in 3 columns of 8. The center column drove straight at Evans's line. The left and right columns pushed wide, attempting to envelop the flanks. Textbook German armor tactics. Pin. Flank. Destroy. Evans had planned for exactly this. The Hellcats did not wait. Tank destroyer doctrine was clear: fire and move. No vehicle stayed in position after firing. The moment a shot went out, the driver relocated. 20 meters, 50, sometimes 100. Engines roared, tracks churned. Thin armor relied entirely on motion. German gunners fired where the Hellcats had been. The targets were already gone. Hartmann's crew was running on exhaustion and adrenaline. For minutes of close-range combat, 6 Panthers destroyed. 17 rounds remaining. The gunner's hands shook as he traversed the turret. Adrenaline bleeding off, fatigue setting in. The loader wiped sweat from his eyes and slammed another round home. The battle was no longer an ambush. It was a fight for survival. And it was just beginning. The loader's shoulder burned from cycling rounds. The driver's eyes ached from staring into thinning fog. No one said a word. They just kept fighting. The first German column struck Company C's center. For M18s opened fire. Range, 250 meters. The Panthers answered immediately. 75mm guns flashed through the haze. High-velocity armor-piercing rounds tore across the field, but smoke, fog, and constant movement made accurate targeting impossible. German shells struck empty ground where Hellcats had been seconds earlier. American shots did not miss. 12 M18s fired from shifting positions, never staying still long enough to be targeted. Every Panther that exposed its side paid for it. Tracks shattered. Engine decks ignited. Turrets jammed. 2 Panthers exploded outright when armor-piercing rounds detonated stored ammunition. At 8 o'clock, the fog burned away completely. Visibility opened to infinity, and the scale of the destruction became unmistakable. 31 Panthers destroyed. 14 still operational. Company C had lost 3 M18s, 2 to German fire, 1 to mechanical failure. 9 Hellcats remained. The 113th Panzer Brigade broke. The surviving Panthers reversed and fled east, engines screaming as crews abandoned formation and doctrine alike. American tank destroyers pursued, firing at 400, then 500 meters. 2 more Panthers were destroyed during the withdrawal. By 8:15, the fighting around Raker-Le was over. 33 German tanks destroyed. 14 escaped. Company C's losses stood at 3 M18s, 7 men killed, 11 wounded. Sergeant Henry Hartmann had destroyed 6 Panthers, all within 4 minutes, all at point-blank range, inside a vehicle protected by 1 inch of armor. But the morning wasn't finished. Intelligence reports followed quickly. The 111th Panzer Brigade, another 45 Panthers, was moving toward Ericourt. Company C had 9 operational Hellcats left. What the 704th Tank Destroyer Battalion had proven that morning was not that the M18 was stronger than the Panther. It wasn't. They had proven that speed and maneuver could defeat armor. That survival didn't come from protection, but from motion. Velocity had beaten steel. At 9 o'clock, battalion headquarters received the reports. 33 Panthers destroyed. 3 M18s lost. Kill ratio, 11-1. Third Army intelligence demanded confirmation. Senior commanders questioned the numbers. Some refused to believe them. Paper-armored tank destroyers killing the most heavily protected tanks in the German army defied everything doctrine said was possible. Captain Tom Evans delivered proof. Battlefield photographs. Ammunition counts. Crew statements. The evidence was undeniable. And the Germans were coming again. Hartmann's M18 had fired 28 rounds. 22 struck German tanks. 6 resulted in confirmed kills. A hit rate of 78%. In most armored engagements, hit rates barely reached 30. This wasn't luck. It was environment, discipline, and doctrine working exactly as intended. The numbers silenced the skeptics, but raised a deeper question. How did tank destroyers with 1 inch of armor survive point-blank combat against Panthers? The answer was fog. With visibility reduced to 30 feet, German gunners could not target what they could not see. American crews treated the fog as armor. They fired from unexpected angles, relocated immediately, and never stayed in one place long enough for return fire. This was precisely how the M18 was meant to fight. Tank destroyer doctrine emphasized ambush, movement, and withdrawal. Hit, relocate, disappear. Never stand and trade fire. Never fight frontal engagements. Speed was survival. But most American commanders ignored that doctrine. They used M18s like tanks, static positions, frontal engagements, direct assaults. Crews paid for those decisions in burned vehicles and body bags. The 704th Tank Destroyer Battalion did not ignore doctrine. They followed it. And they lived. The Battle of Rischier-Lepit revealed something else. Training mattered. The 113th Panzer Brigade was new. Many crews had fewer than 10 days in their Panthers. They lacked fog-fighting experience. They failed to maintain spacing. They advanced without reconnaissance. They moved in column formation through unknown terrain against an unseen enemy. Every mistake compounded the next. Every mistake was fatal. The American crews were different. The 704th had trained for 18 months before landing in France. They rehearsed ambush tactics, rapid relocation, emergency displacement. Loaders could cycle rounds in 7 to 9 seconds. Drivers maneuvered at full speed under fire. Gunners learned to engage targets using sound, movement, and instinct when visibility collapsed. That training saved them. But training could not defeat arithmetic. New intelligence arrived. The 111th Panzer Brigade, 45 fresh Panthers, was advancing from the east. Distance, 6 miles. Direction, error. Estimated contact, 1,400 hours. Company C had 9 operational M18s. Battalion headquarters promised reinforcements, 2 platoons from Company A, 8 more Hellcats, but they would not arrive until 1600. Too late. Captain Tom Evans made his decision. Company C would delay the advance. They would establish ambush positions between Rischier-Lepit and Error. They would fight the same way they had that morning. Hit, move, kill, disappear. 9 M18s against 45 Panthers. The math was worse than before, but the fog still clung to the fields. Hartmann's crew prepared for another fight. 17 rounds remaining. Armor piercing. High explosive. The gunner cleaned the barrel. The loader organized ammunition by reach. The driver checked the engine. Oil pressure normal. Fuel 3/4 full. Track tension good. The M18 Hellcat was ready. And the Panthers were coming. At 11:30, reconnaissance reported renewed German movement. Panthers. Many of them. This time, they advanced differently. The 111th Panzer Brigade had learned from the morning. Their tanks moved in spread formation, scouts forward, spacing maintained. The fog was thinning. By noon, visibility had expanded to 300 meters. The conditions that had saved Company C were gone. At 300 meters, Panther guns were lethal. At that range, an M18's armor was meaningless. One hit, anywhere, meant death. 9 American tank destroyers were about to face 45 Panthers in daylight. The German attack began at 13:20. 3 battle groups, 15 tanks each. Line formation, 200 meters between elements. This was not a reckless charge. It was deliberate, disciplined, professional. Company C occupied hull-down positions along a ridgeline west of Error. Only the M18 turrets showed above the crest. Captain Evans spread his remaining vehicles across 800 meters, overlapping fire zones, pre-planned withdrawal routes already memorized. Fire. Reverse. Relocate. Repeat. Hartmann's Hellcat held the right flank, covering the southern approach. Range to the advancing Panthers, 400 meters. At that distance, the Panther's gun was precise. The M18's gun could still kill, but only with side shots, only at the correct angle. The Panthers crossed the 400-meter line at 13:28. Evans held fire. 350, 300, 250. At 250 meters, Company C opened fire. 9 guns. Simultaneous. The first volley struck 6 Panthers. 3 destroyed. 3 immobilized. The German advance halted instantly. Then the return fire came. 45 Panther guns answered at once. High explosive and armor-piercing rounds tore across the ridge. Most overshot. Firing uphill made targeting difficult, but not impossible. 3 rounds found targets. 1 M18 was destroyed outright. Turret blown clear. Crew killed instantly. Another Hellcat lost a track. The crew bailed out. 7 M18s remained. 42 Panthers still advancing. Evans ordered withdrawal. The Hellcats reversed down the slope, vanished behind the ridge, relocated 400 meters west, and reappeared in new hull-down positions. Total time, 90 seconds. When the Panthers crested the ridge, the Americans were gone. The Germans advanced carefully now. One group moved forward while two provided overwatch. Textbook armored tactics. Slow. Methodical. At 13:45, they reached the second ridgeline. Company C was waiting. 7 M18s opened fire at 300 meters. The second volley destroyed 5 Panthers. 2 more were mobility kills. German return fire was immediate and concentrated. 2 more M18s were hit. 1 destroyed. 1 damaged. 5 Hellcats left. 35 Panthers still operational. Evans ordered another withdrawal. Reverse. Relocate. Cover. Company C fell back into Ericourt, an urban environment. Narrow streets. Stone buildings. Limited maneuver space. Terrain that favored defense. The Panthers would have to enter the town to finish the fight. Hartman's crew had fired 11 rounds so far. 3 confirmed kills. 2 assists. 14 rounds remaining. The gunner's shoulder ached from recoil. The loader's hands blistered from hot casings. The driver's legs cramped from constant clutch work. They stayed in the fight. At 14:30, the German advance reached the outskirts. 35 Panthers. 5 M18s. Reinforcements still had not arrived. The odds were 7-1. But the battlefield had changed. Urban combat neutralized the Panthers' range advantage. Side shots were easier. Rear shots possible. Streets channeled movement. Rex blocked advance routes. Evans positioned his remaining tank destroyers at key intersections. Escape routes mapped through alleys and side streets. The Germans entered Ericourt at 14:42. 8 Panthers moved down Rue Donny. Hartman's M18 waited in an alley perpendicular to the street. Perfect angle. 90 degrees. The lead Panther passed. Then the second. Then the third. Hartman's gunner fired at the fourth. Side shot. 200 feet. The armor-piercing round penetrated. The Panther exploded and blocked the street. The 3 tanks behind it were trapped. Company C struck hard and fast. 6 Panthers destroyed in the streets of Ericourt. 1 M18 lost. 4 Hellcats remained operational. The surviving 29 German tanks withdrew. The 111th Panzer Brigade had lost 16 Panthers. And Company C was still standing. By nightfall on September 19th, the 704th Tank Destroyer Battalion had lost 6 M18 Hellcats, but they had destroyed 49 German Panther tanks in a single day. No American armored unit in Europe had ever done that. On September 20th, General George S. Patton arrived at Company C's command post. He wanted to see the vehicles that had stopped the 5th Panzer Army. Patton walked among the Hellcats, ran his hand along their thin armor, studied the open turrets, spoke directly with the crews. He stopped at Hartman's M18. Patton asked how a vehicle with 1 inch of armor had destroyed 6 Panthers at point-blank range. Hartman answered simply, fog, speed, training, and luck. Patton promoted Captain Tom Evans on the spot and awarded him the Distinguished Service Cross. The citation praised fearless leadership, tactical brilliance, and command under impossible odds. Evans tried to redirect credit to his men. Patton refused. The commander earned the medal. But every man in Company C knew the truth. The battle had been won by loaders who cycled rounds in 8 seconds. By gunners who hit targets they could barely see. By drivers who maneuvered at full speed through fog and fire. And by soldiers like Sergeant Henry Hartman, who destroyed 6 Panthers in a vehicle most tankers called a death trap. The Battle of Ericourt continued for 3 more days, from September 19th to 22nd. The 704th Tank Destroyer Battalion fought elements of the entire 5th Panzer Army. German after-action reports later confirmed the destruction of 281 armored vehicles, Panthers, Panzer IVs, self-propelled guns, and tank destroyers. American losses were severe but unmatched in scale. 7 minutes and 18 seconds destroyed. 14 damaged. 23 men killed. 41 wounded. The kill ratio exceeded 40-1. Military historians later identified Ericourt as the largest tank battle on the Western Front in 1944, larger than Normandy, larger than engagements that would follow during the Battle of the Bulge. The result was decisive. The German 5th Panzer Army withdrew. Patton's 3rd Army resumed its advance toward Germany. And the M18 Hellcat earned its reputation as the most effective tank destroyer in Europe. Sergeant Henry Hartman survived the war. He continued fighting through France, Belgium, and Germany. The battalion crossed the Rhine in March 1945 and reached Czechoslovakia by May. Hartmann's crew destroyed 14 German armored vehicles in total, 6 at Error and 8 in later battles. He was never wounded. His Hellcat was hit 3 times, each time lightly damaged. The crew repaired it and returned to combat. After the war, the 704th Tank Destroyer Battalion was deactivated. The men went home. Hartmann returned to civilian life. He rarely spoke about the war and never claimed hero status. When asked about Error, he always emphasized the same thing: 5 men, 1 crew, training, and teamwork. The M18 Hellcat remained in service until 1953. The U.S. Army eventually dissolved tank destroyer battalions, shifting anti-armor roles to main battle tanks. But the Hellcat proved the doctrine had worked. Speed could defeat armor. Mobility could overcome firepower. Tactics could outweigh steel. Today, a memorial stands in Aricourt, honoring the men of the 704th Tank Destroyer Battalion. The inscription records what happened there in September 1944, when American tank destroyers broke a German armored army, saved a town, and helped shorten the war. And it stands as proof that a vehicle once called a paper coffin became a weapon that changed the battlefield.